They didn't just think I was a failure. That night, my family made sure everyone at my brother's engagement dinner knew it. I sat quietly at the table, my napkin resting on my knees, while my father laughed about my wasted years. My brother smirked, and my mother nodded like it was settled truth. I didn't interrupt. I didn't defend myself. Then his fiancée leaned closer and whispered, "Wait, you're..." The room went completely still. Even my mother froze. Before I tell you what happened next, tap like, comment where you're listening from, and share if your family has ever underestimated you, because that silence changed everything in that exact moment. My name is Lauren Hayes, and in my family, names only mattered if they came with titles people could brag about. Realtor, broker, investor. Anything that sounded stable, respectable, and profitable. My name didn't. It drifted around the table like background noise, noticed only when someone needed a comparison. The engagement dinner was held in a private room downtown, dark wood walls, soft lighting, the kind of place designed to make everyone look successful. White tablecloths, heavy silverware, a server refilling glasses before anyone asked. My parents loved places like this. They believed where you sat mattered more than anything you could explain. I was seated 2 chairs away from my brother, close enough to hear every quiet joke, far enough to stay out of the spotlight. He looked relaxed, confident, already practicing the role of future head of the family. People leaned toward him when they spoke, laughed a little harder. My parents watched him with the same expression they'd worn my entire life when talking about him, pride mixed with relief. No one asked how I was. Not really. And when someone glanced my way, my mother stepped in before I could answer. "Lauren's still figuring things out," she said gently, like smoothing a wrinkle only she could see. My father added something about patience, about how not everyone was built for real pressure. They smiled like they were being kind. I focused on the table instead. The flicker of the candle, the smell of steak and pepper, the low hum of voices from the main dining room. Those details grounded me. I'd learned long ago that if I stayed quiet enough, people would talk like I wasn't there. My brother's fiancée sat across from me. She didn't dominate the table. She observed it. When my parents spoke, she listened closely. When my brother talked about work, she asked questions that slowed him down. Her eyes followed tone more than words. At one point, my father joked about how different my path had been. Polite laughter followed. My chest tightened, that familiar feeling of being turned into a story someone else controlled. I didn't correct him. I didn't defend myself. Silence had become my habit, not because I was weak, but because I was tired of explaining a life no one wanted to understand. What no one there knew was that this dinner wasn't just another event for me. It was a test, how long I could sit in a room designed to exclude me, and what would happen if someone finally noticed the cracks. My name had always come last in conversations about success. Not announced. Not celebrated. Just added like a footnote no one planned to read. That night wasn't new. It was just louder. As my brother talked about his future plans, my parents leaned in, nodding at every word. My father added commentary, turning ordinary milestones into heroic achievements. My mother smiled, certain she was presenting the perfect family. Every so often, they glanced at me, just enough to remind me I was still part of the picture, barely. Their voices pulled me backward. Months earlier, I'd opened my phone to see photos from a networking night at my parents' house. Drinks by the pool. People in tailored jackets laughing. I hadn't been invited. When I asked my mother about it later, she sounded surprised I'd noticed. She said it was very technical and didn't want me to feel uncomfortable, as if exclusion was kindness. Then there was the holiday barbecue. Heat. Charcoal smoke. Paper plates bending under food. I stood near the fence when my father's voice rose above the music, bragging about my brother, the business, the legacy. Then he mentioned me. Not with pride. With humor. People smiled awkwardly. Someone patted my arm like I'd lost something important, and everyone knew it. Back at the dinner table, my brother lifted his glass and commented about how not everyone follows the traditional path. He said it casually, but his eyes flicked toward me, a reminder. A line drawn. I felt the pressure behind my ribs, the urge to speak, to correct the story, to say something sharp enough to stop it. Instead, I took a slow breath and folded my hands tighter. Reacting only gave them control. Silence, at least, belonged to me. The worst part wasn't the jokes. It was the concern. Before the engagement dinner, my brother had called me, his voice soft. He asked if I needed help buying something appropriate to wear. Said he didn't want me to feel embarrassed. The message was clear. I was the problem that needed managing. At the table, my mother spoke to my brother's fiancé about my future like it was an inconvenience still unresolved. She talked about stability, about how someone might take care of me one day. Her hand rested lightly on my shoulder, gentle, but claiming. That was when something shifted. I didn't look up. I focused on my heartbeat. All the late nights alone. The calls I couldn't explain. The decisions I made without approval. They thought my quiet meant uncertainty. They thought my patience meant dependence. Across from me, my brother's fiancée had stopped smiling. She was watching, really watching. And for the first time that night, I knew the story they'd been telling about me was running out of space. I stayed calm. Still agreeable. Inside, something finally settled. My life had never been as uncertain as they believed. It just didn't look like theirs. While my parents hosted dinners and talked about reputation, my days followed a different rhythm. Early mornings into late nights. A quiet apartment. The low hum of my laptop. Calls from different time zones. Progress measured in signed documents, cleared payments, short messages saying, "We're moving forward." No applause. No audience. Just momentum. I never spoke about it, not from shame, but necessity. The work required silence. One careless word could undo months. So when my family offered advice or money, I smiled and declined. Being underestimated was safer. That night, I realized how deeply they confused restraint with weakness. They saw my simple clothes as failure. My rented apartment as proof I'd fallen short. They didn't see the discipline behind living quietly while building something fragile. My brother leaned back, satisfied. My father ordered another round. My mother planned future holidays. They were comfortable. Certain. Across the table, the fiancé stopped engaging with the performance. Her gaze returned to me again and again, thoughtful, sharp. She wasn't listening anymore. She was observing. I recognized that look. I let myself breathe. Not because I needed validation, but because power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits. The dinner continued, but the balance had shifted. My parents kept talking. My brother stayed confident. But tension stretched beneath the surface. I remained seated. Silent. Not because I had nowhere else to be, but because I knew exactly when it would matter to stand. The server returned with drinks. My father raised his glass. To family, he said. And new beginnings. Everyone echoed him. I followed half a beat later. My brother launched into another story. Bigger house. Bigger future. My parents polished every word. And Lauren, my father added suddenly, gesturing toward me. She's always been independent. The pause before that word was intentional. My mother laughed softly. She likes doing things her own way. The way people talk about habits they hope will pass. We just want her to be secure. I kept my eyes on the table. The wood grain. A scratch near my plate. Anything solid. Across from me, the fiancée didn't look away. She tilted her head slightly. Then asked calmly, "Len, what exactly do you do?" Before I could answer, my brother laughed. "It's complicated. Some tech thing." My father nodded. "A tough space." The fiancé didn't smile. "What kind of platform?" The table went quiet. "She's modest," my mother said, touching my arm. "She doesn't like to talk about it." The fiancé leaned in. Is it logistics related? I looked up. Yes. Global? I nodded. Supply chain optimization? Yes. The silence thickened. She murmured, wait, and stopped. Everything froze. Then she said carefully, Lauren Hayes, you're the founder, aren't you? I nodded once. My brother made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Founder of what? She ignored him. Pulled out her phone. Turned it toward the table. An industry article. No photo. Just numbers. Investor quotes. A founder who avoided attention. This platform, she said evenly, is one of the most closely watched in the sector. My father leaned forward. My mother's smile vanished. We've been trying to get a meeting for months, she continued. My brother shook his head. That's not. She looked at him. You wanted me to meet visionaries. Silence. My mother's hand slipped off my shoulder. My father's face strained. Why didn't you tell us? I lifted my glass. Took a sip. You never asked. My brother stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. The whole point, the fiancé said calmly, was that you didn't know. Fear crossed his face. I stood, folding my napkin carefully. I should go. The fiancé nodded. Respect clear. I didn't look back at my family. I didn't need to. The silence followed me, not dismissive this time. Heavy. Earned. And for the first time in my life, that silence felt like justice.